Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast. I'm Mike Calabrese, joined today by Tanner McGrath. Stuckey is getting a much-needed day off. He'll be back on Thursday. One other programming note for all of you hoping to hear our lovely voices on our Saturday live show. A week from Saturday will be the first episode of the season, February 22nd, so be sure to tune in the morning. It will be streaming through our YouTube channel, and that's where we're going to go through and give out our live picks, some look at the futures market, last bits of news, injuries, availability, some of those steam reports, where the money is moving, bet percentages, all those great things to help you get in the black on those huge college basketball Saturdays. Now, the NFL is over. Football is done. The eyes of a weary gambling nation turn to the college hardwood, which is why I'm so thrilled to be joined by Tanner McGrath, because we're going to get into the weeds for this episode. We're going to give out more picks than we have in any episode this year, and, at least in terms of a per basis, in terms of how many bets we're throwing out there. We're going to skip past the rants and what was positive and just focus on 6 of the biggest games on Wednesday and Thursday, then get to our best bets. And I'm also going to throw in some player props and see Tanner's reaction to that by the end of the episode as well. Tanner, how you doing? Do you feel the pressure of the two-man game here? Or do you think we can go Danny Wolf, Vlad Golden, and give a little two-man weave and fill up the stat sheet?
I'm just thrilled that football's over and we can actually focus on what's important, and that's college basketball and March. So, I'm thrilled. Let's get into it.
All right, so I mentioned at the top we're going to go through some of the marquee games, just some high-level thoughts. If we have plays, leans, we'll throw them out there. Let's start with Villanova St. John's. Everywhere you turn at this point for the Johnnies, every stat, every chyron on the screen is they've done this for the first time since 99, since 85, since Chris Mullen did this. All of a sudden, this team, it seems like the ceiling appears to be Final Four. What they did against UConn in crunch time, I think, was a testament both to the coaching staff, that final play that he drew up on the baseline, needing to extend that lead from a single possession to 2 to seal it away, getting that wide open mid-range jumper. It was a thing of beauty. They know what they are and they know what they're not. They are a defensive team who can just squeeze the life out of you. They're not a very good shooting team, but it seems as though they've embraced that, hey, you're allowed to take jump shots inside the three-point arc. Why don't we just go ahead and do that? Because it seems like we're pretty good at it. And it's not a passing of the torch, particularly when it's Rick Pitino, the elder statesman in all of college basketball this season. But it does seem for the first time in years that Hurley has been surpassed in terms of coaching acumen within the Big East. So all of that being said, is this a letdown spot against Villanova?
Yeah, you wonder if the Johnnies are overvalued, but I don't know. They've been great on the road this year. They're 8th in Haslametrics away from home metric. Villanova might be due for the letdown, if anything. They just had wins over Xavier and DePaul by shooting 19 for 39 from 3, 48%. In theory, Nova's relentless underscreening in the half court and just great ball handling and transition defense should give the Johnnies up-tempo, interior-based offense some issues. And it sort of did in the first head-to-head matchup between these two. St. John's shot 40% from the floor. They were held under the 1 point per possession threshold. And Villanova's 5-out motion offense could exploit a dribble penetration denial, gap denial, matchup zone defense that is vulnerable against solid spacing and shot making. The Johnnies rank 346 nationally in low-quality threes forced per shot quality. And that sort of happened in the first head-to-head matchup between these two as well. Villanova had 20 points on 18 catch-and-shoot jumpers. They shot 10 for 26 from 3. But how do the Johnnies win games? You mentioned it, right? They play suffocating defense. They now rank 2nd in Ken Palm's adjusted efficiency, defensive efficiency, by the way. And they dominate the shot volume battle. They lead the Big East in field goal attempt differential. So how do they win the first matchup by 12? On the road. They held Villanova, at home. They held Villanova to 40% 2-point shooting and scored 15 second chance points on 17 offensive rebounds. But the real key to this rematch is that St. John's got to the line 40 times in that matchup. They had a 71% free throw rate, which is stupid. Villanova can foul a bit much. They're like nation average, I think, while the Johnnies rank 5th in the Big East in free throw rate. So I don't know if Villanova gets a friendlier whistle at home. You'd think the Wildcats can hang in this game. If anything, I'd look towards under. Schematic matchup, I don't think is super offensive friendly on each side, especially if Villanova controls the pace and shoots average from 3. The first matchup went over by the 2 points on the closing line, despite the Johnnies shooting 40 free throws. So that's where I would look, if anything.
For our next game, Mizzou against Oklahoma, the Tigers, one of the stories in all of college basketball, certainly in the SEC, surprising. They jump out to a 17-4 start to the season, 6-2 in SEC play. But they've dropped 2 in a row, both compelling games against Tennessee by 4, against Texas A&M at home by a 3-point margin. Has anything changed for you with the Tigers? I mean, those are, I know we don't like to get too carried away with this, but those are quality losses to quality teams that are going to be flirting with, top 3 seeds come March Madness. So no shame in dropping narrow games against them. But has anything changed in terms of your evaluation of the Tigers? And do you think this is a play on against a Sooner team that has been boom or bust, to put it lightly, this season?
Yeah, I mean, Mizzou was probably, I don't know what you think, like maybe flying a little too close to the sun before. I think they were due for a few losses. I do think that this is Mizzou or nothing here. And the reason why is that Oklahoma is just kind of your downhill driving ball screen centric attack behind the super impressive Jeremiah Fears. While Mizzou is more of a secondary motion based offense, they run a lot of stagger screens in the perimeter, excellent spacing, shot selection squad. But Mizzou is a switch everything ISO funneling defense, and they've been elite in ball screen coverage and rim protection. While I think Oklahoma actually is getting a little lucky from 3 on defense. They allow a high volume of threes, and I think they're a little bit vulnerable there, and I think Mizzou should be able to run their offense. And the bigger issue in this game for me is that Fears, like so many Frosh guards, keeps turning the ball over, and the Sooners are getting obliterated on the glass both ways. While Mizzou will throw in some trapping zone pressure and they're a really tough team on the glass. I don't know if you've noticed this, but this Gates team is much tougher than his past ones. So I think the Tigers should just obliterate the shot volume battle. So I really lean Mizzou here. Moser's typically a good dog to back. I mean, he's hit like 53% as an underdog in his career with the Sooners. I think he's 69-61 against the spread as a road dog with the Sooners. So that'll likely keep me away. But yeah, Mizzou or nothing.
This next one is a hat tip to one of our favorite leagues, the SoCon at the mid-major ranks. Chattanooga and Samford, I believe they're first and third in the conference standings. This is going to go a long way in determining who the regular season champ is. Do you have any lean here between the Mocs and the old Buckyball?
So it's actually a 3-way tie in the SoCon right now across the top. Samford, Chattanooga, and Greensboro, plus East Tennessee State's 8-4. I got a question for you first. Among those 4, which one would you trust in the tournament setting the most?
I think I'm going to go Samford in terms of that pecking order. There's a lot to like about Chattanooga. It's been a program that I've backed on numerous occasions in recent years. I mean, they came, a Malachi Smith floater away from making it out of the first rounds, 3 or 4 seasons ago. So this is a team that is not new money in terms of being competitive in the SoCon. But for this particular game, it's a stay away. I prefer to kind of pick my spots when it comes to mid and low major basketball. I think there's, situational angles that don't get reported. And as Stuck loves to say, you get taxed in these situational spots. Fewer and fewer of those situational taxes as you move your way down the card, the bottom of the barrel. So this is where, in terms of SoCon basketball, this is the best of the best. So I think this line is, probably going to be pretty tight. And I don't necessarily have a take in terms of who's going to win against the spread or even outright in this spot. But I know that you wanted to add it to the card to discuss it, so I'd love to hear your take.
Yeah, I mean, you said spot tax. Well, Samford coming off the loss to East Tennessee State, I wonder if that line's going to get steamed up. And because I kind of like the Mocs here. And the reason why I wouldn't trust Samford, I think, in the tournament is that I just think that they are really mortal when they're not turning teams over and hitting a million threes, right? And I think Chattanooga can avoid both those outcomes. And look, the Mocs just look a lot better lately. They just have been playing really good basketball. I mean, they looked drunk for half of the non-con, and everything really fell apart in that conference season opening loss to Mercer. But they've won 7 of 8 since. Huff, Bonham, and Weiland is superstar backcourt. I mean, the only loss during the stretch actually came against the Samford Bulldogs, who rallied from down 16 to win by 4 in Chattanooga. But they really only won because the Mocs shot 5 for 26 from 3, 19%. Bonham and Huff went 2 for 13 combined. Shot quality actually graded it as an analytical expected win for the Mocs, a 15-point win. And I think it's easy to see why. The Mocs, they had an off shooting night, but they are typically an elite press and zone offense. They turn the ball over at the lowest rate in the SoCon. They are elite in catch and shoot creation, and they're awesome at cutting, which is all of those things is how you beat the buckyball zone traps and press, right? You can beat Samford's defense by cutting behind the press and shooting over the top. Meanwhile, on the other end of the court, Chattanooga is an elite transition denial defense, probably because they don't turn the ball over. They don't give any opportunities away. In the first head-to-head matchup between these two, they held the Bulldogs to 7 transition possessions. Samford scored 5 points on those. That's like impossible. And Samford's, rim and 3 heavy offense. Chattanooga's been a good rim and 3 defense. They rank top 3 in the SoCon and top 100 overall in both rim and 3 rate and points per possession allowed. And they've been really good in catch and shoot denial, which again, super important against Samford. This handicap is very similar to when I bet Furman against Samford a couple weeks ago. I think 6 points is way too many. I think that if Chattanooga can, hit a few more triples in the rematch, I think that this could be much closer. KenPom has this at 6, and I think that would be way too many. But yeah, if Chattanooga could just hit a few more threes, I think they have everything here to keep up. And plus the mocks are top 50 in Haslametrics away from home metrics. So I like the mocks.
We turn our attention to the Thursday card. The Dons of San Francisco playing Gonzaga. The Bulldogs now all the way down to a 9 seed in bracket matrix. This feels like one of those games, if the Zags were to drop it, all of a sudden they're on bubble watch. It becomes vital down the stretch to essentially win out, to feel as though you're a stable at-large bid, or then the pressure just slides to the West Coast Conference Tournament, needing to grab an automatic berth. Am I overstating what this means to a Marquee team that, at least back in November, we all kind of assumed when they were humming offensively, this is the same exact team, different moving parts and some different strengths, and Graham Ike on the low block, that slows them down a little bit. But other than that, we can just expect, business as usual out of Spokane. It's clearly not the case. But how far have they slipped? In your opinion, is this a spot to play the Dons? And if so, do you think we're going to end up seeing an NIT Marquee for the first time in, 25 years?
I mean, the thing is, Gonzaga's been pretty unlucky, I think. Stats by Will, a guy that is a good follow on Twitter, had a great article on this recently. And it's basically they've been unlucky in a few crunch time performances. I mean, let's say they flip the overtime game against Oregon State, the away game at UCLA where they lost by 3, and they flip one of the 2 overtime losses to Kentucky or West Virginia. They're 20-4 with a much better resume. They're probably a lock for the tournament. I mean, I think that for the first time ever, Gonzaga might be a little bit undervalued just because of some unfortunate close game variance. On the flip side, San Francisco's defense, I think, is pretty overvalued. Conference opponents have shot 25% from 3, including 16 for 82 during this most recent 4-game winning streak. That's 19%. At the same time, their interior defense is getting ripped to shreds. They're 10th in the West Coast in 2-point defense. Opponents getting to the rim nearly 22 times per game, 7th percentile. You can look at both of the St. Mary's matchups, where I know they won the second one, but I think St. Mary's scored a combined 78 points at the rim, which is just crazy. And what do I look for when I'm looking to fade Gonzaga is good posting, rolling, cutting defenses that hang at the rim. And San Francisco's not that. Of course, on the flip side, San Francisco is a borderline elite transition defense. So it's so important to keep Gonzaga out of the open court while turning them into jump shooters. I think that they can maybe do half of that. I'd wonder if Gurlifson would maybe bust out some zone, but the Zags are a great zone offense with their, kind of playmaking forwards. On the other end of the court, the Dons are a big jump shot reliant offense, especially in kind of the pick and pop handoff isolation game. And I do wonder if Gonzaga is a little bit vulnerable against that. I mean, they allow a lot of threes. I think you're able to move EK around, make him defend in space if he gets switches, and they're a bad isolation defense. I think, if anything, I don't know what you think about this, but I might play over. I think the last 2 matchups between these two have gone over. And I just, San Francisco's, I think their defense is super overvalued. I think they're soft on the interior. The number would have to be right, and the Dons would have to hit their threes, which I think they could. And the Zags would also have to speed the Dons up because San Francisco likes to play a little bit slower. But I think that they could do that because the Dons have not been a great ball handling team in conference play, which might give Gonzaga a few more of those easy run out buckets. If anything, I'd look over. Yeah.
Yeah, the Downey soft interior defense from San Francisco really screams to me a huge game opportunity for EK. And beyond just the open looks and the Matador defense in the lane, there's less of a likelihood he's going to get himself into foul trouble, getting swarmed, catching somebody with an elbow, picking up an offensive foul. So in terms of a look, I like the over there as well. Going to turn to the Big Ten now. Maryland traveling to Nebraska. Nebraska seemingly has turned it around. I think they've won 4 or 5 in a row. And they've, at least dating back to last year, had a formidable home court advantage. This game, though, speaks to, is Maryland, at least in my opinion, is Maryland ready to take that jump and to be not just a good story in the Big Ten, but a threat when they get to Indianapolis for the Big Ten tournaments, and then come tournament time to be able to win basically no matter where they get sent in terms of pods. I know that Mick Cronin isn't the only one who's been complaining about travel this year in the Big Ten, but when it comes to the NCAA tournament, there's winners and losers every single selection Sunday in terms of where you get set. You need to be able to win anywhere, and to go halfway across the country into a hostile territory against a team that's hot. I want to see the big three of Reese, of Queen, of Gillespie really turn it on and show me something. I'm a believer in the Terps. Certainly this pod has been, we've bought them to make the Final Four. We bought them really since early in the season when Queen is playing at a high level to be potentially a lottery pick in the NBA as well. All the components are there. This just really feels like one of those games where if they're for real, they're either going to win or they're going to lose at the bell. But if they, kind of lay up an egg in this spot and lose by 8 to 10 points, I'm going to pull back my expectations a little bit. Am I overstating how important this is really for both of them? Because another win for the Corn, and all, like, they're not playing their way onto the bubble, but certainly a season that looked like it was headed for lost territory has now been reclaimed by Hoiberg.
I think you are overstating it a little bit, actually. Mainly because, first of all, I can't get a goddamn read on this Nebraska team. Yeah, they lost 4 in a row and all must wins, and then all of a sudden they've won 4 in a row. But Maryland, dude, I love this Terp squad. I think they're super dynamic on offense, and I think they're a pretty good defense. I think they have sort of all the tools that you need to make a deep run in the tournament. I like that they have a lot of interior scoring with the 3 big guys that you talked about, but also Gillespie is a fantastic ball screen orchestrator. And I think that's really, important to have guard play, obviously, in March. But the reason why I think it's overstated is that I bet Corn and the under in the first matchup between these two, and I'll probably do it again here. I think the matchup's just bad for Maryland. And the reason why is Nebraska's complete and total post-denial defense. They take away the post at all costs against Maryland's post-reliant offense with Queen and Reese. And Nebraska's set interior ball screen coverage against Gillespie's ball screen creation. To beat Nebraska, you have to do it with floor spacing and effective secondary catch and shoot creation, which is why, they lost 5 in a row because those teams shot like 40% from 3. But Maryland doesn't do that. They don't create secondary catch and shoot stuff. They just want to work through the post and get to the rim. Nebraska, on the other hand, I don't know if they're going to be able to run their dribble handoff based offense. Maryland is a really good DHO defense, and the Nebraska offense is so limited to just Bryce Williams shot creation. But Maryland won the first head-to-head matchup by 3, despite shooting 10 for 25 from 3, 40%. I don't think I expect that to happen again. And Maryland is also a very questionable road team, 353rd in Haslametrics away from home metric. I like Nebraska and the under again.
All right, let's close up this segment of must-watch games on the Thursday card. Charleston against UNC Wilmington. Tell me why this CAA matchup is can't miss.
So, top heavy CAA right now. You've got Towson's 11-1.
That's an understatement for sure.
Yeah. Towson's 11-1. Wilmington's 10-2. Charleston's 9-3. Campbell's 9-3. That's a surprising one. And then William Mary's 8-4. Those are 5 really good teams. And now you got 2 and 3 facing off. I believe, if I remember correctly, Wilmington won the first matchup between these two on the road by 2. I do think that Wilmington, by the way, I love all these teams. These are 5 really fun teams. Like, up-tempo offenses, really fun to watch. You guys have watched Charleston for forever. They still run a lot of the same stuff they did with Kelsey. But Wilmington's a great transition offense. They're good in the post. William and Mary shoots the lights out. Like, just a lot of fun teams in the CAA. I do think that Wilmington's offense is a little overvalued and due for some regression because I think they're shooting hot from 3. And, shot quality graded their 2-point head-to-head win over Charleston as an analytically expected loss. You have to stop Wilmington in the post. Like I said, they are elite in post creation. The Cougars didn't do that in the first matchup. They allowed 20 points on 18 post-up sets, but they're typically an elite post-up defense. Brizovic is a really good post-up defender. And on the other end of the court, Charleston runs all their offense through Brizovic on posts and rolls, and Charleston just obliterated Wilmington on ball screens in that matchup. They scored 42 points on 35. Brizovic scored 16 points in total. But Charleston also scored 0 points on 7 post-up sets, which I don't think will happen again. Wilmington is a good ball screen coverage defense, but is much more average in the post. My one worry, obviously, is that Wilmington eats in transition again against a bad Charleston transition defense. But the Seahawks scored 19 points off turnovers in the first matchup to the Cougars 9, which doesn't make sense when you consider that Charleston is actually a really good ball handling team that can handle the press, while Wilmington has run into a huge turnover problem lately. They're now 10th in the league in turnover rate, and they've recorded 41 over their past 3 games, including 16 in the last matchup against Drexel. So I guess my handicap on this one is that overall net, I think the turnover margin and a few more buckets and key sets flip towards Charleston in the rematch. I think KenPom has this line Wilmington -6, and I think that's too many. I kind of like Charleston in this matchup on the road.
For anyone who hasn't seen Brizovic play, what do you think is a good NBA comp? I mean, he's flirting with like a 2010 average at times this season. Certainly someone who can impact the game really all over the court. Are you reminded of anyone? Doesn't necessarily have to be an NBA player. It could be a collegiate player as well. Someone who's a kind of a stretch big.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, he's good because he's great on the boards. He's good in his rolling sets, but he can take it off the bounce. I'm trying to think. Maybe Raynaud, like from Stanford. That's a decent pick. You know who he reminded me of? It's not a good high major comp, but Matt Rogers from American. I think they're kind of similar. I saw him carve up. Who did they play the other night?
American had what, Lehigh? Or that was 2 games ago?
Yeah. And Matt Rogers just like I think he scored the last like 3 buckets, just like kind of driving into the post and hitting these huge floaters. Brizovic is kind of a guy that is really crafty in his game downhill, and you can really build an offense around him.
All right, as I promised at the top, we're going to get into our best bets the rest of the way, as well as 2 player props before we get out of here. So let's start with your top play. I believe it's on Wednesday between Georgia Tech and Stanford.
That's right. I like Georgia Tech here at home. I think KenPom has a Georgia Tech -1. I would love to get like a cheap money line, like -120 or something, but I'd probably lay 2. Worth mentioning, big injury issues for Georgia Tech, really beat up. But I really need McCollum to play for me to make this like a viable play. He's currently dealing with a head injury. I guess he's day to day, but Stanford's also dealing with injuries too, Gieler and Blake's. So that could even things out. Just monitor the injury report closely in this game. But spot is great. I mean, Tech comes home off a double-digit road loss to Virginia. Stanford heads cross country after a 1-point home win over North Carolina State, where the Cardinal rank 352nd nationally in Haslametrics away from home metric. They are 1-4 on the East Coast this year, with a 1-point win over North Carolina, the corpse of North Carolina, and 4 double-digit losses. Schematically, Stanford's going to play through, like we talked about, Raynaud in the post. Awesome post player, especially underneath Smith. But Georgia Tech's post defense is borderline elite. I trust my guy Bay Ndongo to hang with him down low. And then on the other end of the court, you've got David Stoudemire with his ball screen-centric offense, guard-friendly. It's mostly downhill rim running with George, Terry, or McCollum to the rim, or getting Ndongo off the roll. He's great off the roll. But Stanford's dribble penetration defense this year is horrific. It's abhorrent. And they have been blitzed by ball screen penetration all year. SMU, NC State, North Carolina, Wake all took them to the cleaners. Their interior and paint defense keeps regressing. And while I don't really trust Georgia Tech's offense in any way, they are about 5 points per 100 possessions better at home. And they're 4-2 at home in conference play this year with a win over Louisville and their only losses to Duke and Clemson, which I think is pretty good. So as long as they're remotely healthy, I really just want McCollum in there as a ball screen creator because he's so good. I think the Yellow Jackets get it done. I'm worried they get obliterated in the glass, but Stanford's also had some ball handling issues that could rear their ugly head here and maybe even out that shot volume battle. So I like Georgia Tech.
If you take the average ACT scores for these two programs, it comes out to 67. Do you think both Stanford and the Rambling Wreck get to 67 in this game?
It's going to be close. That's a good prop bet. Someone should offer that.
All right, I'm going to go to the Patriot League for my first play. Army's going to be a short favorite in North Baltimore against Loyola Greyhounds. And this line is more or less predicated on the fact that Loyola continually plays in close games in the Patriot League. 6 of their 12 conference games have been decided by 6 points or less. And now this is when I just think the season's going to get bumpy for Josh Loeffler. I think he's done a nice job with Loyola this season in terms of giving them some identity, some fight. But this is a multi-year rebuild project. And their final 6 games come against 5 teams with winning conference records. So I think this is where there's going to be a significant separation in the Patriot League down the stretch. Now, they were getting dog-walked by Army up at West Point in the first meeting. They were down 47-30 at halftime. But then Loyola got hot. Army went into a little bit of a second-half lull. They only shot 3 for 8 from the foul line, so they weren't able to pad their lead in that way. They were lucky to pull it out 74-72, but I think we as a gambling community are beneficiaries of that game that was a lot closer in the final score than it was. We were closer to a runaway than a Loyola upset. So, in this game, I think it just comes down to Jalen Rucker, who, by the way, this is a homecoming for him. We usually like to slam on the fact that Loyola has no home court advantage to speak of for a variety of reasons, and that remains true. But Rucker went to Gilman, which is less than 2 miles away. So he's going to have friends, he's going to have family, high school classmates, everyone's going to come. And it seems as though every time that he plays against Loyola in North Baltimore, he goes big. He gave Loyola 35 on the road last season. The year before that, 22. And as a freshman in the Patriot League tournament, he gave them 21. He's coming off a performance where he went 12 for 17 for 26 points, against the Hounds in that first meeting. I don't think they can stop him. I don't think they have an answer for him. Sometimes it can be as simple at the low major level. You get the best player on the court and you're expecting big things and you're laying less than one possession. This Army team is just a whole lot better than Loyola. So I'm going to be interested to see where this line actually pops at. These are just projections at Army -1. I'd play them up to -4 in this spot. And Loyola, like I said, they've been pesky for the better part of this Patriot League season, but so much of the low major experience can be scheduling. Who are you playing? When are you playing them? Stuck brings this up a lot with Lehigh not having Higgins. There's been injury questions with some of the teams that they played, and Loyola is kind of playing that brand of basketball where they have different leading scorers on a given night. So they're a little bit more flexible as they're growing. Some of these teams are so dependent on their top 2 players as Army is with Rucker. I think the Knights get it done here. What are your thoughts on a team that I know you're bullish on? I would love to see it. It'd be a great story for them to win the Patriot League. Someone other than Colgate, it seems we're trending in that direction, and that's kind of opened things up at the top of the Patriot League.
Are you worried about their legs at all heading on the road after a double overtime win against Bucknell?
As Stuck likes to say, these are 19, 20, 21-year-old kids. Like, if this was the Patriot League tournament or a tournament setting where you're playing, 2 back-to-back or 2 in 3 days and you're traveling and you have to go to home courts, and then I think it gets a little bit dicey. I think there's enough separation in this spot to say, they got their rest. And honestly, in terms of what is more daunting in terms of a schedule, I'd say probably their day-to-day on campus as opposed to playing an extra 10 minutes against the Bison, which was a phenomenal game, by the way. I think one of my favorite tweets from a mid-major account this year, they're like, what has happened to the defense budget? And they just screenshot Bucknell going into triple digits against Army in double overtime. But yeah, you can't talk me off Army in this spot. I like Loyola. I like where they're headed moving forward. They're in a high school rich environment in terms of high school talents in the Baltimore, greater Baltimore area. So it can really be a pretty quick turnaround, in my opinion, for them to be middle class in the Patriot League. But with this schedule that they're staring down in the next 3 weeks, I think reality is going to hit them right in the face, and they're going to end up probably third from the bottom in the Pat League.
I love this squad. I love the Ruckers-Scovens duo. They don't turn the ball over ever. And they're a great press offense, which is key against Loyola's kind of extended pressure happy defense. They should be able to score in the paint, against Loyola's relatively useless paint defense. Should be able to, run their DHO sets. The Army offense, they're just so dynamic. I love what they do on offense. And you talked about the Patriot League tournament. We talked about this the other night. I think I'm going to bet Army in the Patriot League tournament when that time comes. We don't think anyone in that league is particularly good. I think there's some injury issues at the top. And I mean, look, Rucker could just go crazy for 3 games in March, and then they have a bid. I probably can't play this spot for a few reasons. One, I am worried about their legs. 2, I'm worried that Loyola is going to post them into oblivion. I mean, they scored 42 paint points in the first matchup. These two combined for 82 paint points in the first matchup, which is crazy. But again, I had that worry for Army against like Bucknell, BU, Lehigh, Colgate to an extent. And the only post-heavy team they lost to was American and the unstoppable Matt Rogers, like we talked about. Also, I wonder if Loyola is due for a lot of positive shooting regression on defense. Conference opponents have shot 40% from 3. They finally saw some regression lately. They beat BU and crushed Lafayette. So I'm going to stay off this, but I love this Army squad.
Now, you teased it mentioning Campbell earlier. The Fighting Camels have your attention. Is that game on Thursday?
That game is on Thursday. Yes, sir.
All right. So who do you like in that one? What's the spread?
So I think Ken Baum has it Campbell -1. I would love to get Northeastern as a dog here. Any dog price. I'd take them on the money line, even like -110. Campbell has been awesome. I think they've won. How many have they won in a row? Like 6, 7. They've won 8 at 9, maybe. They're wildly overvalued. The defense specifically is insanely overvalued. This is one of the nation's worst interior defenses by every metric. And the Camels are getting bailed out because conference opponents have shot 22% from 3. They were begging to lose on Monday at home against shorthanded, without their 2 best scorers, 4 and 21 North Carolina A&T, who shot over 60% from the interior, but lost by 4 on the road because they shot 1 for 14 from 3. That's the story of Campbell's season so far. NCAA led by 7 with 10 minutes left. The Camels are so due for a loss. This defense is not the best in the CAA, like Ken Palm says. They're like the 10th best, like shot quality says, when factoring in regression. Campbell, again, overdue for a loss, especially because they played the league's second easiest schedule so far. And I like this spot for them to drop one against Northeastern because the Huskies are super undervalued, especially after playing the league's toughest schedule so far. And they're a great defense that have been bitten by poor 3-point shooting variance. It's the flip side. Conference opponents have shot 40% from 3 against them. And that's really key here because the Huskies are an elite catch and shoot 3-point denial defense. They lead the conference in both 3-point rate allowed and catch and shoot jumpers allowed per game. And that's big against a Camels team that lives on catch and shoot creation. And on the other end, Northeastern is just a rim reliant offense that can just punish Campbell's useless interior defense. They rank 3rd in the CAA in paint points per game. King, Woods, and Pratt combined for nearly 24 per game, and they will get every one and more of those here. The one worry I have is that the Huskies' shaky ball handling unit turns the ball over a million times against Campbell's aggressive press-happy defense that leads the league in defensive turnover rate, while also handing the Camels a bunch of easy transition buckets. But Northeastern's transition defense, I think, has started to look better lately. It's trending up in conference play, so I'm going to take my chances here and fade the Camels, who I probably will be fading for a little bit here.
If they get it done for you, Rashad King has been on a heater, to put it lightly. I think he's had 60 points in his last 2 games. He's one of those rare wings at the low major level. He's 6'6", over 200 pounds. He can get to the tin. He can shoot. He can facilitate for teammates. He's somebody that can, on a given night, go 25, 5, and 5. You don't see that all that often in college hoops, particularly at this level. So
it's fun how they have that, like I said, that paint rim reliant offense, but it's the guards that are scoring. It's all downhill. It's fun to watch. It's a good team.
All right, I'm going to give that a fun over if you're looking for some up-pace, up-tempo basketball where the shots are falling all over the place. Over 154, let's call it, in terms of the projections. I'd play up to 156 between Omaha and South Dakota State. The Mavericks have played above this total in 5 of their last 6. South Dakota State has blown past this number in 3 of their past 4. And in their first meeting, Omaha took it 87-80. The other piece of this is that it's pretty rare for a low major to have a significant home court advantage, but the Jacks play so much better on their home floor. It's arguably the top low major home court advantage in the sport. They're averaging 95 points per game at home in Summit play. So that's why I would be shocked if this lands below 155. But for whatever reason, I think odds makers are kind of asleep at the wheel when it comes to totals in the Summit. And Omaha has both been lucky in terms of how teams have shot against them, and yet they're still 265th in defensive efficiency. I think they have not reached the bottom. And when it comes to playing against the top teams in the Summit, I think they can be punished on the defensive end. They also got favorable whistles against Oscar Clough in their first meeting. He was in foul trouble that first meeting. So I think if he ends up playing north of 30 minutes here, he could have one of his vintage 30 and 15 kind of games. And then what I like a lot about Omaha's offense in terms of their upside, they have three separate scorers you can go off. Markel Sutton has 6 games with 20 plus in his last 8 games, so he's been a consistent go-to guy. J.J. White went nuclear against Oral Roberts last month, scored 35, and then Tony Osborne can catch fire from three-point range. He's someone who can make 4 or 5 triples. That gives them a lot of answers to whatever the Jacks do defensively in this game. Even though it's not necessarily their preference to play at that faster pace, I think they can be sped up. And I wouldn't be shocked for this game to be played in the 80s and for this to cruise past a number in the mid 150s in terms of a total. So I'm going to go there and, bank on kind of a shootout between the top 2 teams, or, contenders at least, for the Summit auto bid come conference tournament time, and go with an entertaining brand of basketball.
Summit League overs, some of the best. Yeah, you said it about Omaha too. Just look, they're still a little overvalued, I think, on the whole, but just so many good shot creators, so many good playmakers. Sutton, like you said, is a dog. So yeah, I like that over.
All right, last one on your card, or did you have anything on the cutting room floor?
Yeah, I've got a little sort of just missed the list here. A few that I wrote down, but I couldn't quite get there for some reason or the other. So I'm just going to go one sentence on each here. This is Wednesday, NC State +7 at home against Louisville. Wolfpack among the better catch and shoot denial defenses in the ACC, which is imperative against Louisville. And I wonder if their post and ISO heavy offense can get going against a sometimes questionable Louisville interior. The Cardinals also off wins against bottom feeders in Boston College and Miami, Florida, and they lost to Georgia Tech on the road just 10 days ago. So I kind of look that way. Thursday, 3 spots I wrote down, but not sure I can get there. South Alabama -5 at home against Marshall. Can Marshall make shots over South Alabama super zone? Because if they don't, their downhill rim running, lack of spacing, ball screen offense will get nothing. Second one, William and Mary -2 at home against Hofstra, some more CAA. Tribe are off back-to-back losses, which shot quality graded as analytical wins because their elite spacing and shot selection offense shot a combined 14 for 57 from 3 on the road against Drexel and Delaware. Now they're coming home against Hofstra, which allows the highest 3-point rate in the CAA. Wouldn't be surprised if the Tribe just went, nuclear from deep and hit everything. Finally, Big West ball, my favorite league this year. Love 2-bid Big West. UC Irvine -9 against UC Santa Barbara. Irvine hopefully fired up after the home loss to UCSD. Santa Barbara has won 3 straight, but only because they shot 34 from 65 from 3 in those games, or 52%. And you're not going to get good looks or high quality looks against Irvine's super drop, which is elite in denying those looks. So might do it if the numbers are right, but yeah.
I'm in for Bill and Mary if you are. So you talked me into it. I agree. I don't think much of Hofstra this year. So if that number is as tight as the projections call for it to be, I don't mind laying the points with the Tribe. I'm going to close this out with Elon laying close to 13 against North Carolina A&T. Hey, listen, A&T has fought the good fight. Despite losing 11 straight up, they nearly upset Charleston and Campbell on the road, falling by 3 and 4 points, respectively, as massive dogs of close to 20 points. But now they continue this road slog. This is their 3rd road trip in a row going to Elon. Their weakness is going to be on full display in this game. They just cannot get a rebound to save their life. Nearly 300ths on both the offensive and defensive end in terms of rebounding percentage. And Elon is just outside the top 10 nationally in offensive rips, thanks to Sam Sherry and Matthew Van Komen. So their twin towers inside, I think, are going to dominate. They're going to get a lot of second chance buckets. As 6.5-point road favorites, Elon covered, winning that last meeting by 8, and they killed him on the glass. 19 offensive boards, 26 second chance points. And they didn't let North Carolina A&T run, which is critical. They held them to 3 fast break points, 8 below their season average. If A&T cannot run, they cannot score consistently up against an Elon offense. It's a bonus if those jumpers fall. If not, they're still going to get those second chance opportunities. And Elon really needs this to kind of pull out of a mini slump because they got UNC Wilmington and Towson coming up. I don't think this is a look ahead moment because I don't think they're in that headspace in terms of confidence. But what they need to know is if they drop this one somehow, all of a sudden they're at risk of losing that bye to the second round of the CAA tournament, which was unthinkable after a 14-6 start, 5-2 in the CAA. So this game's critical. I think it'll get their full attention against an A&T team that basically hung around, kept it a single-digit game in their first meeting. But I think we talked about it with Army in terms of a little bit of that road weariness of not quite having the legs. They haven't had these overtime thrillers, but they've had a lot of road trips. They, basically had to spend a lot of energy, both real and emotional, to be able to hang around with, Charleston and Campbell. So I think that's going to catch up to them in this spot. I wouldn't mind laying a big number with the Phoenix.
Good buy low spot for Elon, who looked like a really elite mid-major squad until about, a month ago. I think they've been a little unlucky, like you said. And maybe North Carolina A&T, maybe the line will get shaded that way because they almost upset the Camels, but we know the Camels are bad. So, yeah, I agree with you.
All right, we're going to close that with 2 player props. They're both high profile, so if you've been dying to hear some names that you recognize after all that CAA talk and, getting deep into the weeds with some of these low majors, this is the palate cleanser portion of our program. I want to hear Tanner's take on this as well. Cooper Flagg, bounce back spot after Duke is upset by Clemson on the road. They got a home game against California. His player prop for points is probably going to be set between 20 and 22 points. I like over here. And the spot is what's interesting. In ACC games where Duke has been favored by over 20 points, and they will be against the Golden Bears here, his over of 21 is cashed 3 of the 4 times. He's averaged close to 24 points in those meetings. And Cal is just an awful half-court defense. Like, I'm not relying on this to be a transition game where Flagg gets, 6-8 points in the fast break game. It's fine if this becomes a half-court slog because Cal gives up 0.93 points per possession in the half court. That's 293rd in the entire country. They're just weak in that regard. They're also weak defending and keeping people off the offensive glass. So I could see, 4, 6, 8 second chance points for Flagg. He's going to get to the line. I think this is going to be a big game to get his confidence and the whole team to get off the mat after losing that kind of emotionally draining game to Clemson. Clemson gave them everything they can handle. It clearly was their Super Bowl. They wanted it more. Listen, Duke was never going to run the table all the way through the national championship game. We talked about it. There's only a few spots, potentially in ACC play, where they could slip up. It's not, an absolute alarm bell situation to lose to the Tigers, but you want to make sure you get right back up and beat the stuffing out of Cal Berkeley. I think they do it, and I think Flagg has a big game. What are your thoughts on that?
So I always say this about Duke handicaps. The key to stopping Shire's offense is stopping their stagger screen actions. And I believe Cal allows 1.11 off-ball screening points per possession, which is in the 12th percentile. They're also the worst isolation defense in the nation. So I cannot argue against you. And yeah, Cooper should go off. And the big part about this is that it should be a blowout, which means we won't get late game execution flag.
Now, this last one is a tip of the cap to Nick Giffen. He loves taking player props on rebounds. I'm going over 8 for JT Toppin, Texas Tech's big against Arizona State. If you throw out his ejection against Houston, in his last 8 Big 12 games, he's averaging 9 rebounds per game. The Sun Devils are weak on the glass, 169th in defensive rebounding percentage, but 280th in allowing offensive rebounding opportunities for their opponents. So I just see that as this spot where Toppin could get 3 or 4 offensive rips, and then it becomes really easy to see a path for him to get to double digits. This number could land anywhere in the market between 7.5 and 9, depending on the juice. I'm advocating, taking all of those on the over. But Arizona State also does a good job of forcing contested shots. And this is kind of the hidden factor of taking rebounding numbers. you want to make sure that there's rebounding opportunities, particularly on the offensive glass. And if you're playing a defense that's just, turning everything into a layup line at the rim or wide open threes, then maybe you don't get as many opportunities. The Sun Devils do a good job forcing contested shots, nearly top 60 in shooting efficiency allowed during Arizona State's 3-game losing streak. This is the key for me. Their rebounding margin to Oklahoma State, -12, to K-State, -4, to Arizona, -14. I think we're going to see a similar number where Texas Tech beats them by about 10 in the rebounding margin, and Toppin's doing the yeoman's work there. So like I said, I would play this all the way up to 9 if you can get plus money. Anywhere in that 7.5, 8, 8.5 range would be ideal.
Trivia. Arizona State ranks second to last in the Big 12 in rebounding differential during conference play, -64. Who's the worst team?
In the Big 12. Let's see. Baylor?
Not quite. Colorado. Also dead last in turnover differential. But yeah, point being Arizona State, weak on the glass, weak in the shot volume battle. So no complaints here.
On Thursday, Stuck will be back with myself and Greg Waddell talking the entire weekend card. And as I mentioned, a week from Saturday, February 22nd, our live show will be back starting at 10:30 a.m. Eastern, streaming over on our YouTube channel. That's BBOC. Hopefully we'll see you there. Throw us some comments, some likes, shares, everything that's, kind of spreads the gospel of college hoops being the main show in the college sports universe, as well as really the betting universe at this point. We don't have to share that spotlight with anybody. I know that there's regular season hockey in the NBA, but you're here for a reason. You want to get in on the action and get, some of that March Madness energy and vibes before the calendar actually turns to March. For Tanner McGrath, I'm Mike Calabrese. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.